Good morning. This is Dr. Rajesh Yadav, working as Assistant Professor and Head of Dialysis Technology Program in the School of Allied Health Science, Sharda University. So, if we discuss about the learning, the ability to alter behavior on the basis of experience is called learning. And if we talk about the memory, it's the acquisition, storage, and retrieval of sensory information, ability to recall past event at the conscious and unconscious level. Now, type of the memory. So it can be divided into two types. First, physiologically, on basis of how information is stored and recalled. It is of two types, implicit and explicit memory. Second, depending upon permanency of storage. So it is of three types: short-term memory, intermediate, and long-term memory. So first we'll discuss about type of the memory. First is a declarative memory, it is also called explicit memory, and second is a non-declarative memory or implicit memory. So if we discuss about the declarative memory, it is also of two types. One is a semantic memory and second is episodic memory. Semantic memory include recognize the person, place, code, phone numbers. So these are included in the semantic memory. While if you talk about the episodic memory, we have to learn an incident of the past. That means the past incidents is included in the episodic memory. So next we will discuss about detail of the semantic memory. So in the semantic memory included the visual memory, auditory memory, or somatosensory memory. So next we discuss about the non-declarative or implicit memory. So it includes unconscious learning by way of procedural memory or priming phenomena. For example, in the procedure of DNA isolation, that means the procedure of anything that will be included like learning of the vehicle, learning of the car, riding the bicycle. So all the procedure which is included in the phenomena is called uh, implicit memory or non-declarative memory. So it also include motor skills, habits, learning process and rules, and how to perform some things. It's all included in the implicit memory. So implicit memory also included like procedural memory, like that is a learning of guitar or something emotional response. The amygdala is responsible for the emotional response for this memory, and swimming. So it's all included in the implicit memory. So memory can be divided into the various types like short-term memory. It is also called working memory, like learn phone number, codes, places. Second is the retrospective memory. Retrospective memories include past memory, and prospective memory include future memory. So next there are some areas which are responsible for the memory like hippocampus, amygdala, striatum, and mammillary body. So hippocampus is the major area and it is also responsible for the long-term potentiation. That means how the short-term memory is converted into the long-term memory. So if we talk about the memory, the hippocampus is the major area and the main function of the hippocampus is long-term potentiation, which was given by the Raman Kahal. So brain stored memory by altering the strength of the connection between the neurons. So amygdala is also part of memory. So it is one of the two almond shaped group of the nuclei which is located deep and medially within the temporal lobe of the cerebral cortex or brain. So now come to the short-term memory. Short-term memory allow recall of the period of several seconds to minutes without rehearsal. Short-term memory is supported by the transient pattern of the neural communication, depend upon the region of the frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex, and parietal lobe. Generally, three hypotheses was given to explain the short-term memory. First is it is caused by the continuous neural activity resulting from the nerve signal that travel around and around a temporary memory trace in the circuit of reverberating neurons. That means there is something pattern which is included in the short-term memory. Another hypothesis is given that presynaptic facilitation occurs in the short-term memory. While Synaptic potentiation is also explained in case of short-term memory. Second is the intermediate memory. So in the intermediate memory can be explained by the fact that there is two types of the neuron. One is a facilitator neuron and second is sensory neurons. So these facilitator neurons secrete neurotransmitter that is called serotonin, and this serotonin acts as a receptor for these sensory neurons. So the receptor activates adenylate cyclase enzyme in the sensory neurons, and adenylate cyclase convert ATP into the cyclic AMP. So as the result, cyclic AMP formation occurs. Cyclic AMP activate protein kinase enzyme. Protein kinase generally enzyme is responsible for the phosphorylation. So protein kinase enzyme phosphorylate the protein of potassium ion. As the result, potassium ion channel become closed and not allow potassium ion outside the result. As a result, action potential remains constant in a neuron because of repolarization or hyperpolarization. The blockage can be last for minutes to several weeks, and this prolonged action potential causes prolonged activation of calcium ion, and this large quantity of calcium ion will enter into the sensory neuron. As the result of calcium ion entry increase neurotransmitter and greatly facilitate the synaptic transmission. So this is the process of intermediate memory. Next is a long-term memory. So long-term memory, actual structural changes instead of the chemical changes. Because some structural changes occur in the long-term memory, it has been observed, like increased vesicle release in the neurons, or increase large number of neurotransmitter release, increase presynaptic terminals, and thus change in the structure of the dendritic spines. So these are changes which has been observed in the long-term memory. Now this is the hippocampus area where we are showing the path of the memory. Like there is a parahippocampal cortex, and the information goes into the entorhinal cortex, and through the entorhinal cortex it goes to the dentate gyrus, and from the dentate gyrus it goes into the hippocampal CA3 region by the Mossy fiber pathway, and from CA3 fiber to CA1 fiber CA1 region by Schaffer collateral pathway, and then it comes into the subiculum, and through the subiculum it goes into the entorhinal cortex and then perirhinal cortex. In this way, this is the path of the memory in the hippocampus region. So the main function of the hippocampus is a long-term potentiation. It involves protein synthesis, growth of the presynaptic and postsynaptic neurons and their connections. Long-term potentiation occurs in many parts of the brain, and studies on the synapse of hippocampus, connection of the pyramidal cells in CA3-CA1 region by Schaffer collateral fiber. So this is the mechanism of the long-term potentiation. There are various steps through long-term potentiation occur. So this is the figure of the long-term potentiation. Now the applied aspect of the memory, some drugs that activate the brain and stimulant act as a stimulator like caffeine, amphetamine, physiostigmine, nicotine, pimoline, and these drugs act on the central nervous system and stimulate the nervous system or brain. So the some chemicals which is responsible for the addiction like morphine, amphetamine, cocaine, heroin, nicotine, and alcohol. So all these products produce the dopamine on the limbic system. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter which is responsible for the pleasure of the moments. So it is also secreted by the rewarding area or rewarding hormone. So there is a disease of the memory called amnesia. So it is of two types. One is anterograde and second is retrograde amnesia. So if we talk about the anterograde amnesia, the ability to establish new long-term memories, and it is mostly in the lesion involving hippocampus. While in case of retrograde amnesia, it is an inability to recall past memories. Amnesia greater for the recent past than remote past. and in this amnesia, the lesion involving temporal lobe of the cerebral cortex. So one of the diseases related to the memory is Alzheimer disease, in which the acetylcholinergic neurons has been destroyed and the deficiency of the acetylcholine neurotransmitter occurs. Mostly it occurs over the 65 years old peoples, and loss of the postsynaptic neurons occurs. So this disease is also called senile dementia. So this is the figure you can see here. This is normal brain, and this is the damaged portion of the brain which is caused the Alzheimer disease. So these are characteristic of the Alzheimer disease, like the problem occurs in the language, problem solving, judgments, calculation, attention, psychiatric symptom, and loss of the spatial orientation. And this is the left portion of the cerebral hemisphere and right portion of the cerebral hemisphere. It is generally known that left portion is command to the right portion, like left cerebral hemisphere command the right hands or right legs, while the right of the cerebral hemisphere control the left hand and left legs. So this is called dominant left or right dominant hemisphere. So concept of the categorical representation of the hemisphere, that means the function allotted to the left hemisphere in right-handed person and this function allotted to right hemisphere in the right-handed person. Thank you.